travel has completely revolutionized the way that we move around, but even still, it doesn't take away from its inherent danger as well.
You what?
So?
Alright, you will maintain 1990.
In today's video, we'll be looking through a few instances where plane crashes were caught live, as well as the circumstances involved. Aerom, Mexico Flight 498. We begin this countdown with a devastating crash of Aerom, Mexico Flight 498, which took place in August of 1986. On that day, a scheduled flight from Mexico City to Los Angeles collided with a separate plane, eventually crashing into a neighborhood. And to date, it remains one of the deadliest mid-air collisions in the United States. According to reports, the Aeromexico jet was a McConnell Douglas DC-9, a 5-abreast single-aisle aircraft which was pretty popular for the time. While moving above the Los Angeles suburb of Cerritos, the flight began its descent carrying 58 passengers and 6 crew, and at about 11:52 a.m., the jet's engine collided with a Piper PA-28-181, whose manifest showed that it was moving from Torrance to Big Bear City in California. The collision caused the Piper's cockpit to become completely sheared off, with its passengers being decapitated. With no pilot or holding structure, the jet then went down, crashing into an empty playground at the Cerritos Elementary School. As for the DC-9, all of its horizontal stabilizers and most of its vertical were separated. It immediately took a dive, slamming into a residential neighborhood and exploding on impact. And all 64 passengers on board sadly lost their lives, with the resulting fire claiming the lives of 15 additional people on the ground. Air France 4590. The Concorde was a revolutionary piece of technology for the aviation industry, a supersonic jet that could fly faster than the speed of sound, and the moment it was developed, airliners elbowed themselves, trying to get as many of them as possible. Sadly, it did not take long for the flaws of the Concorde's design to be noticed, and the crash of Air France 4590 was one of the major reasons the jet design has been abandoned since. Air France 4590 was a passenger jet on a charter flight from Paris to New York, July the 25th of 2000, and just 5 minutes before it took off from the airport, a separate plane took off from the same runway and headed towards Newark International. While taking off, the DC-10 lost a titanium alloy strip that was part of its engine cowl, and that strip measured at 17.1 inches in length and between 1.1 and 1.3 inches in width. While the DC-10 wasn't affected by it, the Air France 4590 plane apparently ran over this piece of debris during its takeoff run. It was moving at 185 miles per hour, and the collision led to the front right tire of its left main bogie being cut off. A large chunk of tire debris was sent into the underside of the left wing, sending a massive pressure shock wave that ruptured the plane's fuel tank. Because the Concorde was already too far into its takeoff sequence, there was just no way to reverse what was to happen.
Le décryptage des boîtes noires confirme que le moteur numéro 2 qui s'est enflammé est alors en panne.
With suboptimal speed and damage to several components, it was obvious that a crash was inevitable, and all passengers and crew members were killed, making this the only recorded crash of a Concorde flight in history. The Fairchild Air Force Base B-52 crash. On June the 24th, 1994, the Fairchild Air Force Base in Washington became the center of major news after a U.S. Air Force Boeing B-52 Stratofortress had crashed. At 7:30 local time, a flight crew at the base had come out to practice for an air show. Led by Lieutenant Colonel Arthur Bud Holland, he served as a designated aircraft commander. Ideally, the mission plan called for several low-altitude passes, bank turns, and steep climbs, along with a touch-and-go landing on the base's runway. Eventually, the flight took off at 1:58 in the afternoon, completing most of its drills without issue. But while preparing to execute the landing on the runway, Holland was instructed to go around because another plane had just landed. He then asked for permission to execute a 360-degree left turn, but as he began to execute, The plane flew at a very tight, steeply banked turn. About 75% around the turn, it banked past 90 degrees, dropped quickly, and clipped some power lines, which would lead to the plane falling and catching fire immediately. All the crew members were killed, and subsequently investigators found several reasons for the crash, including the actual crash sequence and poor mission planning. Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961. Although they may not necessarily be common today, airplane hijackings are a pretty deadly occurrence. One moment, a flight is moving and operating as expected, and the next, a bunch of dastardly hijackers spring up from nowhere to ruin everybody's day. On November the 23rd of 1996, we saw one of the most infamous cases of a plane hijacking when 3 men took over Ethiopian Airlines Flight 961, a commercial flight that was moving from Addis Ababa to Abidjan in the Ivory Coast. The flight had initially been delayed, but ended up taking off around 8:09 in the morning. Just 20 minutes after takeoff, 3 Ethiopian men suddenly charged into the cockpit and hijacked the aircraft. Armed with no more than an axe and a fire extinguisher, the men threatened to blow up the plane and demanded that the pilot reroute them to Australia.
Fly to Australia.
What?
Fly us to Australia.
We don't have enough fuel to get to Australia. It's too far.
Despite the pilot explaining vehemently that they didn't have enough fuel to get to Australia, the hijackers remained adamant, so the captain followed the coastline southward, his goal to get to the Comoro Islands. But even as the hijackers continued to ignore his warnings, he began to circle the area in hopes he'd be able to land at the main airport. By 11:45, the right engine had flamed out, and the left engine did the same just a few moments later, causing the plane to glide. The pilot made one last-ditch effort to land in the Prince Said Ibrahim International Airport, but a fight with the hijackers at the last minute left him unable to locate it. The final hope was to conduct a crash landing right in the sea, but just before the plane made contact with the water, it was bank left some 10 degrees, and the left engine and wingtip hit the water first, causing the plane to tilt left. The rest of the plane entered the water unevenly, causing it to break apart. As expected, the broken parts of the plane's fuselage quickly sank, and of the 175 people on board, 125 were killed, including 3 hijackers. Pacific Southwest Airlines Flight 182. On September the 25th of 1978, the Pacific Southwest Airlines Flight 182 was scheduled to fly from Sacramento to Los Angeles and then on to San Diego. The plane was a Boeing 727, and everything seemed fine when it took off. Just moments after leaving land, though, the PSA crew was alerted about a small Cessna approaching, and it was being flown by 2 unlicensed pilots, one of whom was using it for practice. Since he was flying under visual flight rules, he did not need to file a flight plan. Even worse, the main pilot of the Cessna, a U.S. Marine Corps sergeant, was said to have been wearing a hood that limited his field of vision and blocked his peripheral view. Add to that the fact that the PSA flight crew were said to have not followed proper flight procedures, and you won't be too surprised to find out that the 2 planes end up colliding.
We heard a loud crash overhead and looked up to see part of a small Cessna airplane spinning to the ground. Then suddenly we heard a thunderous crash that sounded...
This collision was pretty serious. Both planes directly crashed into a busy intersection in a San Diego neighborhood, with the hit killing everyone aboard the PSA flight, as well as a further 7 people on the ground. The 2 men flying the Cessna were killed, while 9 people on the ground suffered serious injury from contact with the resulting debris. National Airlines Flight 102. Plane crashes don't happen to just passenger planes. As it turns out, even cargo airliners can be affected by the cruel fate that is a terrible, ghastly crash. Such was the fate of National Airlines Flight 102. The cargo plane was scheduled to move from Afghanistan to Dubai on April the 29th of 2013, with 1 refueling stop planned. The plane had made this journey several times in the previous month, so it was pretty much a routine flight for the carrier. It left that day carrying 5 armored vehicles and 7 passengers on board, and after stopping to refuel, it was climbing through 1,200 feet when its nose suddenly rose sharply. The plane stalled out, banked right, and leveled off just before it went straight back to the ground. As footage would show, the entire plane exploded into a massive fireball as it achieved impact with the ground. All the crew members were killed, although fortunately no one on the ground who was close to the crash was injured. Pulkovo Aviation Enterprise Flight 612. Pulkovo Aviation Enterprise Flight 612 was a scheduled passenger flight that met its demise August 22nd of 2006. A little over 30 minutes after taking off, it was confirmed that the vicinity of the flight had developed severe thunderstorms, and as a result, the aircraft drifted into an area with turbulence. Soon enough, the crew requested to climb to 39,000 feet and was given permission to do so. 5 minutes later, the crew disengaged the autopilot, and almost immediately the plane's stall warning sounded, while its angle of attack rose to 46 degrees. Coinciding with a drop in airspeed to absolute zero, the flight then sent out an SOS and soon after completely disappeared from radar. In a short while, everything went downhill. The flight entered a deep stall, with 2 of its engines flaming out and stress just kept on building. 38 minutes after leaving the ground, the flight eventually crashed at 45 kilometers northwest of Donetsk. A local farmer and a young couple trying to get shelter from the rain at a nearby location witnessed the plane go down. A teenager also managed to record footage of the crash, uploading it to the internet just 1 day after the terrible event.
You what?
No?
In total, all 10 people on board the Tu-154 plane died that day. Investigations would show that the crew did all they could to prevent it, but the instructions and manuals they had didn't give them guidelines on what to do in that situation. American Airlines Flight 77. On September 11th of 2001, America witnessed arguably the darkest day in its history. Members of a terrorist group had managed to hijack 2 planes, flying them straight into the Twin Towers of the World Trade Center, killing thousands upon thousands of people. However, while the crashes at the World Trade Center had taken the headlines, what many people don't know is there were other crashes involved in this operation. One of them was American Airlines Flight 77. Operated with a Boeing 757, the flight was a commercial airline scheduled to move from Dulles International Airport in Northern Virginia to Los Angeles International. The flight had taken off around 8:20 that morning, and 31 minutes after becoming airborne, terrorists suddenly stormed the cockpit and forced everyone else to the rear of the cabin. And that's when hijackers took control of the plane. By 9:29 a.m., just 1 minute after a separate flight had been hijacked as part of the overall mission, they disengaged the autopilot and assumed manual control of Flight 77. While the flight was just 5 miles west-southwest of the Pentagon building in Arlington, the plane spun clockwise, causing it to descend 2,200 feet. They then advanced the throttles to full power, diving quickly for the target. At 9:37 a.m., flying at a speed of 530 miles per hour, Flight 77 crashed into the Pentagon's western flank. The plane hit the building at the first floor, eventually being rolled to the left as the right wing remained elevated during the crash. In general, it took just 0.8 of a second for the aircraft to pass 310 feet through the 3 outermost rings of the structure, and this would unleash a fireball that rose 200 feet above the building. It took the lives of all 64 people aboard the flight, as well as another 125 that were in the Pentagon itself. Sknyliv Air Show Disaster. Sometimes a small case of showboating can end in an unmitigated disaster, and in the case of the Sknyliv Air Show disaster, we saw a perfect example. July 27th of 2022, over 10,000 spectators came out to witness the air show, an aerobatics presentation at an airfield in Ukraine. This show was staged to commemorate the 60th anniversary of the 14th Air Corps of the Ukrainian Air Force, and as part of the festivities, a Ukrainian Air Force Sukhoi Su-27UB pilot tried to make a maneuver. Despite being flown by an experienced pilot, the aircraft entered a rolling maneuver with a downward trajectory at low altitude, and while still descending, the plane's left wing suddenly dropped, causing it to descend even faster. The crash was quite terrible, killing 77 people and injuring 543, 100 of whom were taken to the hospital. And as for the pilots, they were eventually sentenced to jail following extensive investigation. United Airlines Flight 175. Heading from Logan International Airport in Boston to Los Angeles International Airport, United Airlines Flight 175 was the domestic passenger plane that was hijacked by 5 al-Qaeda terrorists the morning of 9/11. The airplane was carrying 65 people on board, and it departed from Logan at 8:14. Less than a half an hour into the flight, the hijackers sprung into action, injuring several crew members as they forced their way to the cockpit. They immediately murdered both the pilots while moving everyone else to the rear of the plane, and then the lead hijacker took control. About 21 minutes after hijacking the craft, they crashed it straight into the South Tower of the World Trade Center, hitting the 77th to 85th floors of the building directly. Thanks to media coverage that had begun earlier as a result of the crash in the North Tower, the impact of Flight 175 was only one of the 4 attacks to be televised around the world. And as a result of the crash, all passengers on the plane, as well as hundreds more who were in the building, would sadly lose their lives. American Airlines Flight 11. Like the United Airlines flight, this one was also scheduled to carry passengers from Logan International to Los Angeles International. The plane left the runway at exactly 7:59 in the morning, and literally less than 15 minutes after takeoff, terrorists who were on board got up and began wreaking havoc. In their initial attack, they injured 2 people and murdered 1. They breached the cockpit, forcing everyone to the back of the plane against their will. As expected, they were able to overpower the pilots, while their leader took over the plane's controls. It would not take long for air traffic controllers to suspect that the flight had been hijacked, and with 2 flight attendants also secretly contacting American Airlines to pass along information about what was taking place, it soon became clear that a terrorist situation was happening. Still, though, it would be too little too late as the plane flew into the North Tower of the World Trade Center, achieving impact from floors 93 through 99. 17 minutes after that, United Airlines Flight 175 crashed into the South Tower, and as you would imagine, everyone on board was killed. Thousands more lost their lives as a result of the collision with the buildings, and just like that, America had witnessed one of the darkest days in its centuries-long history. Reno Air Show crash. On September the 6th of 2011, the Reno Air Races, an aircraft racing competition organized in Reno, Nevada, was the scene of one of the worst airshow disasters in all of American history. During the race, James Leeward competed with the Galloping Ghost, a highly modified North American P-51D Mustang racing aircraft. He was moving in 3rd place and had just come out of a pylon number 8 when his plane suddenly pitched up, inverted, and nosedived. With no control or room, it slammed into the apron in front of the grandstands, clocking a speed of over 400 miles per hour. The crash took place in an area with box seating, and according to reports, it literally disintegrated on impact. While there was no fire, the crash ended up claiming lives of 7 people, including the pilot himself, and 3 more people died at the hospital, while a staggering 69 had suffered injuries. Tam Airlines Flight 3054. On July the 17th of 2007, the world got a proper lesson in urban planning after Tam Airlines Flight 3054, a Brazilian commercial airliner, suffered a catastrophic crash after hitting a gas station. The plane had left the airport with a smooth enough flight, and as you can imagine, all eyes were on the landing sequence to be as smooth as possible, but this would turn out to be where things went south. This particular craft had been cleared to land on a runway, which was notorious for being quite difficult to maneuver. In fact, just a day before this particular crash, 4 pilots who landed at the airport reported they experienced difficulties in braking, including one who was lucky enough to stop the plane only a few meters before crossing the end of the runway. Still, though, it didn't seem like much had been done to remedy the situation. Tam Flight 3054 was cleared to land and the pilot moved into position, but according to reviews, despite the fact that there was no incident upon impact, the plane didn't slow down normally, instead veering too close to the left and causing an imbalance. With the runway being elevated above the surrounding area, the momentum of the aircraft carried it right over the adjacent thoroughfare, and the runway itself was said to have been recently resurfaced, and it didn't have enough water channeling grooves to help reduce the danger of hydroplaning. And considering that there was some moderate rain around that time, the plane just kept on moving. It eventually crashed into a 4-story express facility, which contained offices and a warehouse, and was close to a Shell gas station. Investigations into the crash would show there were several issues at play, from mechanical challenges with the plane to slippery floors caused by the rain. The accident was truly ghastly when you think about it. American Airlines Flight 191. On May the 25th of 1979, a McConnell Douglas DC-10 operating American Airlines Flight 191 was scheduled to move from Chicago's popular O'Hare International Airport to the Los Angeles International Airport. Everything seemed to be fine at first, but as the flight lifted off, reports confirmed that the number one engine and its pylon assembly became separated from the left wing, ripping away a section of the leading edge. And this combined unit flipped over the wing's top, landing on the runway. Normally, a detachment of one engine would not have been much of a problem. However, because the engine got separated and took a chunk of the left wing with it, the plane soon lost its balance. Combine this with the fact that several related systems had also failed due to the loss of the engine, and the plane was pretty much doomed from the start. The aircraft managed to climb to about 325 feet above ground level, while disseminating a white mist trail of fuel and hydraulic fluid from the left wing. Eventually, it crashed into a field about 4,600 feet away from the runway.
Passengers escaped from a DC-10 following an aborted takeoff from New York's Kennedy Airport in November 1975. Birds had been sucked into an engine. 2 died and 28 were hurt in Los Angeles when a DC-10 blew a tire and lost its landing gear.
Investigations into the crash would show there were several issues at play, from mechanical challenges with the plane to slippery floors caused by the rain. The accident was truly ghastly when you think about it. Ramstein Airshow Disaster. We'll end this video with a case of terrible showmanship that once again caused much more harm than good. August the 28th of 1988, the United States Air Force Ramstein Air Base in Germany played host to the Flugtag 88 Air Show. While pulling off their presentation, 3 planes in the Italian Air Force display team sadly miscalculated and collided, causing what would be the deadliest air show accident in history at the time. It all began when a total of 10 jets from the Italian team were performing their pierced heart formation. The formation was difficult to pull off and was important for everyone to be very alert. As you would imagine, not everyone was. As 2 heart-forming groups passed each other, one of the heart-piercing planes suddenly hit them. Apparently, one of the pilots had completed his maneuver too early, causing him to hit the other planes and crash onto the runway. The pilot of the aircraft ejected before impact, but was killed as he slammed onto the runway before his parachute could open. Besides him, 69 other people died, while 346 spectators sustained serious injuries as a result of the fire. If these instances have shown us anything, it's that we need to all be very careful with planes. Progress in safety measures has been made, but it's obvious that more work needs to be done. But what do you think? Which of these instances was the most harrowing? Be sure to let me know your thoughts in the comments section down below. Also, subscribe to the channel so you never miss another great video like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.